everybody. Welcome to today's class. I am so excited to be here with all of you today. For those of you who don't know, my name is Bridget, and I am a filmmaker and animator in Brooklyn, New York. And I am so excited to be here with you today and share my practice a little bit with you. If you haven't been in our previous two classes, I'll give you a little review. So I am here to teach you how to make stop motion animated films from the comfort of your own home. So using materials that you can find in your home. And the very first class, we got to learn the basics of stop motion animation. We learned how to set up our animation station and then a few animation techniques. The next class, we learned all about story writing, and we learned some great methods for how to write stories with your kids to create an animation with them. And today we get to learn kind of I think it's like the meat of this whole process. Today we get to learn how to make everything. So we're going to learn how to make our sets and our puppets and our props, and we're going to learn what all those things mean. And in my opinion, I think that the more thought and the more work you put into everything that we learned today, the easier it is to animate, right? Because all of a sudden, you have thought through every process of animation, you've thought through all of your different scenes. So when you get to your animation station, all you have to do is animate. Everything else is taken care of. So today's class is very important. And for that reason, we have a lot to get through in a little bit of time. So I'm going to be going a little bit faster than usual today. So if I'm going too fast or you have a question, go ahead and put it in the Q&A or the chat box, and I'll make sure to answer everything at the end. So bear with me. It's going to be a long class, but it's going to be great. So today we are going to watch a little screening, which will prepare us for, looking at puppets and sets. And then I'm going to show you a little bit how to make a puppet. I've made a few on my own, so I'm going to tell you about that process. And then we're going to animate it so you can kind of see it in practice. So I would love to get started with the screening. This is a really beautiful 1-minute short animated film by a woman named Emily Hoffman. As we're watching it, I really just want you to think about the process. How did they make it? How did they make all of their puppets and sets? And what did they have to think about so that the puppets could move, right? How could they do work during the making process so that the puppets were able to move? So that's what I want you to think about. And Hara, I am ready to show the film.
I am who I am because of her. I come from the dull brown of my mother's eyes, watching over me while my eyes seek darkness. Her warmth throwing me back into reality. I come from the love of my mother's tight, long embrace. I am the answer for her pain that increases the lines etched upon her face. These lines that spill her sufferings out during her troubled, restless nights. One day, I will wipe away from her face the waterfall of hopelessness and replace it with a river of hope and salvation. One day, I will show the world I am that girl who shoots bullets into the sky and makes doorways of freedom, hope, and relief. Not only for my mother, but for all those out there who are in need.
So beautiful, right? I think it's so incredible, even though it's only a minute long. So this was an intro for a Netflix series. This is the only part that's animated. The Netflix series, I think, is a documentary. But all that aside, we'll just focus on the stop motion part. So I thinking about, the materials that she used, thinking about kind of her process leading up to animating. I'm going to show you a few stills. and we're going to think about it together. So I'm going to share my screen. Awesome. So pretty obviously, I'm sure you all noticed that she only used paper to animate this, right? A lot of the paper she painted on, I think some of the paper was already colored. And so when thinking about, what we know so far about animation, if she's using all flat objects, the camera was facing down, right? So everything that she animated was just on her surface, which is what we're going to do today. And so I want us to look at this scene right here. Remember, this is a moment when she's hugging her mother. So when we just think about what our body does when we hug somebody, how many parts of our body move? Our head probably moves a little bit. Our back maybe moves when we hunch over. Our upper arm moves. Our forearm moves. Maybe our wrist moves. Right? And so let's look and see if you can even just count how many different parts, different segments of their bodies did Emily create.
Bridget, sorry to interrupt you. We cannot see the slides. If you can stop sharing and try to share again, please.
Oh, no worries. I'm so sorry, everybody. Okay. Oh, did people say that in the chat? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, let's try it one more time. Let me know if it works. Can you see it now?
Yes, now we can see it.
Oh, great. Awesome. Okay. So again, there's paper, there's beautiful colors. She used a lot of watercolor for this. Great. So we were talking about hugging, right? How many parts of our body moves when we hug somebody? And so now that everybody can see it, I'd love you all to count how many different segments were created so that they could hug each other. So I noticed that this hand is separate. This forearm is separate. This upper arm is separate. I noticed that her back is made out of 2 different pieces of paper so she can hunch over. I noticed that her head is separate from her neck. And then I also noticed that she has a few little hairs that kind of wisp in the wind to show movement. That's a lot of different parts of their bodies that can move to create this hugging gesture, right? So now let's look at this one. This one is a little bit simpler. So this is her face, and I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler. Her nose, her mouth, her ears, they don't move. The only thing that moves is her eyes. I don't know if you remember this, but she blinks as she cries. And her hair, again, there's all these little wisps that move. So I want us to really look and see, look very closely. See if you can see each of these individual pieces of paper. And also, I think her head is separate from her neck. All right. And this is the last still. So this seems a little bit even simpler, right? It's just the bullets moving upward. But I want us to think, did they really animate the bullets moving upward? Probably not, right? Instead, they moved this backdrop down as the bullets stayed still to create the illusion that the bullets were shooting into the sky. Okay, so one more activity I want to do with these stills is let's think about these 3 words: set, prop, puppet. So looking at this, what do we think is the set? It's this background, right? And in this set, we have a lot of different parts. We have these little trees, we have these houses, we have a sky, we have some bushes. That's a set. If we look into this one, what is the set? It's just this blue background, right? Very easy, very simple. So a set can be something really intense like this village, or it can be simple. Then let's think about the word prop. A prop is anything that appears in a film that is not a person and not a set. Pretty simple, right? And they're also things that move on their own. So these bullets are a prop, right? They're not a person, but they do have a big moment. All these little stars that are animated as well, those are considered props. And then my last question is, what is a puppet? When we think of puppets, we usually think of things like Sesame Street, right? But in animation, a puppet is the word that we use to describe the characters that we're animating. So this girl's a puppet, the mom's a puppet. Okay. That is everything from those stills. I would love to just dive in. We are right on time. And I'm going to show you guys some puppets that I made. So the very first one that I made is a fish. So this is my fish. This is its little mouth. And this is its fin. So without me telling you, having the fin separate and having the mouth separate, what do you think? Just think in your head, what do you think I could animate? Why did I choose to make one fin separate and the mouth separate? Why did I make that choice? So my plan is I'm going to animate him swimming, and I want his fin to move a little bit as he swims. And I'm going to animate him eating something so we can jump on it. I could have made this fin move, right? I could have made his tail move. I could have even cut this puppet in half so his body could kind of bend as he swims. I could have also made this eye separate so that he could kind of look left and right. But I decided to keep it really simple because I knew that I only wanted to animate him swimming and then eating. So a little tip, especially if you're working with young kids, is I would recommend, this is kind of what I did on my own, is I took a really big piece of paper and I just watercolored all over it and then cut out a fish. And that's why there's these nice pretty stripes all around here. And so what I like to do with kiddos, especially when they're under 5, is I'll kind of say, all right, paint a squiggly line with the purple. Use the blue to paint 3 circles. Use the lighter blue to paint a straight line. And you keep on going and keep on going until the whole page is filled, but you curated the colors so you know it's going to look really nice. And no matter what you do, I think at least, it's very hard to make watercolor look bad. I think it always looks really beautiful when it comes out. And then you can help them cut out a fish. So that's my big recommendation. The next thing that I made is the face of the fish. So in Daughters of Destiny, the film that we just watched, they kind of did the opposite, right? Where the eyes were able to move, but the mouth was stagnant. For me, my eyes can't move anywhere, but the mouth, I made a lot of different expressions. I made a sad face, just a little sad. And I made a kind of, it's supposed to be like a surprise face, like, and I made a big smile. And then I also made some eyebrows because I just love animating eyebrows. I think it's really fun. And then I made some eyelids so that he can blink. So I made one like this for kind of half closed. And then I made one like this for it to be fully closed. So again, I could have done more, right? I could have made these little fins separate. I could have made this hair separate. I could have made his pupils separate so he could look left and right. Right, I could have done a lot more, but I kind of just stuck to impressions or expressions, not impressions. So I recommend that if you are making a close-up of a face, that you leave the mouth out, because that's the easiest thing, in my opinion. It's the easiest thing to animate somebody happy and somebody sad. But it's difficult to do if you draw in the face, right? And so I recommend leaving the mouth blank. I also want to talk about size a little bit. So this is the close-up of the face of this fish, right? And so they're about the same size. And that's really important, you know, especially if your kid is really young or doesn't have really, you know, fine motor skills yet. I think it's really important to make big puppets because they're a lot easier to manipulate. I think it's really easy sometimes for kids to make these little itty bitty tiny puppets. And then it's just so hard to animate with them. So I definitely recommend kind of, now this is almost as big as my face, right? So doing it a little bit bigger, but then keep in mind, as you'll see in a second, if you have a bigger puppet, you're going to need a taller animation station, right? So you can see the whole puppet. Okay, so I hope you learned a little bit about how to think through creating puppets. And I am going to animate them. If you are following along and want to create your own puppet, you can create this fish. So draw a fish, cut out the mouth, and then draw an extra fin. Okay, so here we go. So when we are doing a downshoot animation, the background has to be fairly flat. So this is something that you could work on together for a really long time, right? You could have a really large piece of paper and paint it to the max, kind of like that village that we saw, right? There were so many houses and trees and bushes, and it was so beautiful. But you could also do it really simple. And so today, for sake of time, I'm going to do it really simple. I actually have this piece of fabric that I think kind of looks like a purple ocean. And so I'm going to put that down. The big thing to remember is that you don't want your set to move as you're animating, right? You want it to be still so that it doesn't move between pictures. And so you could tape it down, especially if you're using paper. I would recommend taping it down. For me, though, I'm actually just going to put my 2 stacks of books on top of it because it's kind of big. And I think that will work. So you're going to see how big my piles of books are today. So this is one side and the other side, almost bigger than me. And I'm gonna bring my laptop a little lower so we can really see the animation station, and hopefully you can see me too. I'm gonna put my little rulers on top of it. Woo. A little bit closer together. Okay. And then my phone on top of it. So the first thing I want to animate is my fish swimming and then eating something, right? And so I'm going to bring up my phone. Woo. And I also have all of these shells to be part of my set, and I'm just going to kind of put them down here. And I am going to attempt to do kind of what we learned with the scene with the bullets, where they moved the background to make the illusion of the bullets moving. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to move my shells so that it looks like my fish is swimming, even though my fish is just going to stay in the same place. So another tip, if you have a lot of different separate parts, but those separate parts aren't moving while you're animating, for example, right now, this mouth isn't going to be moving, right? So a tip is you can tape it with a little bit of masking tape or a tape that's easily removable. Just put a little bit of tape on the back of it while you animate. and that can work really well. Okay, so this looks pretty good. And I have a few other shells that I'm going to use eventually. And here we go. So I'm going to move the shells a little bit up, this guy a little bit up. All right, and so now we know what to do, right? We're going to take a picture, and then I'm going to move the shells a little bit this way. I'm going to move his fin a little bit, take a picture, and then I'm going to do it again. Maybe I'm going to add in this shell now to come in kind of from this side, take a picture, and I'm going to keep going, move the shell, move the fin, take a picture. And remember, we learned a few techniques to make sure our hand's not caught. I could say strawberry after each of my pictures, right? So move a little bit, strawberry. I know that means put my hands up. Move a little bit, strawberry, put my hands up. All right, and now I'm gonna make my little gem come in from maybe this side. Move a little bit, move my fin a little bit. Okay, and now that the gem's here, I'm gonna open his mouth just a little bit, right? Move the things, picture. That shell is time to go. And I'm gonna move the gem a little bit more and open the mouth a little bit more, take a picture. And then it's gonna finally go into the mouth. And then as I am closing the mouth, I am going to just take away this gem. Okay, so that altogether probably took me about 2-3 minutes to animate. I hope that when you do it with your kids, you're taking a little bit more time, but still it doesn't take that long. That was a total of 14 frames, so it's a little over a second. And I'm going to show it all to you. So this is what we did. So it looks like he's swimming and then he eats a gem. So again, I could probably have been a little bit more careful with the mouth. If I had used some tape, the mouth wouldn't be moving so much in the beginning. If I had a little bit more time to set up the shot, I might have even made it a little bit higher so you could see more of the shells. And I think if I were to do it again, I would also be a little bit more careful with how the shells are moving, and maybe I would move them a little bit slower. But as you can see, because the fin was moving and because the mouth was moving, I was able to create the illusion of him swimming along and eating. And I think it was a pretty effective animation, right? We accomplished what we needed to accomplish. The fish swam and ate a gem. That's all we needed to do. All right. So now I'm going to show you how to animate changing facial expressions. And so I'm going to grab my cute little fish. I'm actually going to try to move everything a little further down so you guys might have a little bit easier time seeing what I'm doing. I hope that's helpful. I know it's not a perfect setup. Okay, so here we go again. And so another big recommendation I have for you all, I know I'm going to use all of these little things, right? And so I'm going to put them up here to kind of prepare myself to use them. So they're really easily accessible, but they're out of the frame. So I recommend that, have all of your props, all of your pieces really close to you so that you're just ready to animate. Okay, and then let's put this guy over here. Oh, he's so cute. Okay, and then again, I'm gonna kind of decorate it with my little shells because they're nice, I think. Put that guy up there. I don't know, it kind of looks like maybe he's on the floor, maybe there's shells all around, I don't really know. Okay, so I'm gonna start with him having his eyes closed. So I'm gonna put this guy here, right? So his eyes are closed. And I'm actually gonna take 2 pictures because I really wanna show that his eyes are closed, and I'm going to have them open just a little bit. And then I'm going to take the bottom away. And then I'm going to take the top away. So now he's awake. And now I want him to smile. So I'm going to move the eyebrows up a little bit. And then I'm just going to put this down. It kind of seems crazy that there's no lead up to it, right? He doesn't start smiling a little bit, and then a full smile. But with facial expressions, because they happen so fast, our eyes are actually able to compensate and kind of fill in those blanks. And so quickly changing expressions, you know, going from happy to a frown to happy, it actually works. And I'll show you this or you'll see this when I play the film back. And so now I want him to blink. So again, I'm going to put these eyes here. And then I'm going to put this here. And then I'm going to take the bottom away, right? And then I'm going to take the top away. Now I want him to frown. So the thing that I am going to animate very slowly and carefully is his eyebrows. His eyebrows are going to go down and into kind of an angry expression. And when they're finally angry, he's going to frown. And again, that was a very fast move with the mouth, but I'll show you that it actually works. And now I want him to be surprised. But as he's being surprised, I'm also going to have him blink. All right, and his eyebrows are just going to go really far up. And now they're at a perfect spot. And I'm going to have him be surprised. Ooh. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. So that was about 30 frames, which is a little over 2 seconds. And we had 3 different facial expressions, right? He opened his eyes, he smiled, he frowned, he was surprised. So let's see. Whoops, keep pressing the wrong button. Play. All right, so this is what we've got. Sorry, it's kind of upside down. So as you're watching this, I really want you to think, does your eyes actually compensate for kind of those missing frames of the facial expression? You know, does it matter that we did it so quickly? Were you able to understand what was going on, even if you didn't see every individual frame in between? Okay, so let me see how we're doing on time. We are so good. I was so nervous about today. I thought we were going to be running late, but we're actually doing really well. So I'm going to clean these up a little bit, and then I'm going to show it to you one more time on my phone, everything that we did. So first up, let's watch this fish guy one more time. Remember, he swims, he eats his gem. Another choice that I think I should have made is it's a purple gem on a purple background. That probably wasn't the smartest decision, right? Okay, and then I will show you one more time our facial expressions. Sorry guys, it's gonna be upside down, but. So again, really simple to do, right? This whole animation took me, each one probably took me a couple minutes to animate, but in the whole process of setting it up, putting the puppets together, right, that's the thing that takes more time. So your assignment, I'm hoping that everybody who is here was here in last class. If you were not here last class, I really recommend watching last class. because it shows you how to think through your whole story. So if you've already done that work with your family and you know what story you want to animate, what you're excited to animate, you need all of that information for the assignment today. So the assignment today, or the handout you have today, is kind of a graphic organizer for how to determine what you need to make before you animate. So I would like you to think through each of your scenes. And by scene, I mean location, right? So if we think back to the Fluffy McCloud film that we watched last week, the first scene takes place in that like nice grassy mountain knoll. So that would be the whole scene. The next scene takes place at the neighbor's house, right, with the man who's sunbathing. And so I want you to think through each one of your scenes. And in that scene, I want you to think, what does my set look like? How am I going to make my set? What materials am I going to use? Who's there, right? How many characters are present? Which puppets am I going to use? And then which props need to be around, right? So for me, for our fish scene, the set was my cute little cloth, my shells, that was my set. My prop was my little gem that my fish ate, and then my character was my fish. Easy peasy. And then think through the characters, of course, what parts of its body do we want to move in order to accomplish this? So I really want you to do all of that work of thinking through each scene, and then added on to this, I want you to make everything. I want you to make all your sets, all your puppets, all of your props, so that next week, after our lesson, you can actually animate everything and put it all together, which is a very, very exciting, which is, of course, the most exciting part of the process. Okay, so awesome. I think we got through everything, but I want to review a little bit. So today we were able to define the 3 parts of making. We defined set, puppet, and prop. I hope you know what all 3 of those things mean. And then we also learned how to make a puppet so that the puppet can move, and which parts we've decided should move, right? What part of the puppet do we actually need to move so we can actually make it a separate piece? It doesn't necessarily have to be everything. And then the last thing we did was we learned a few animation techniques for a full fish, right? A full body moving along, and also for a close-up of a face. So all of these things are really important to create your own animation. So the last thing I want to touch on for today is kind of the difference between downshoot and upshoot. So today we really focused on everything being flat, right? We created paper puppets, we have this cloth, everything was facing down, just like the film that we watched. If you are watching things like Wallace and Gromit, or anything by Leica, like Kubo and the Two Strings, all of that is made with 3-dimensional puppets, and all of that, the camera is facing upward. So my recommendation when you're first starting out animating, I think it's better to start everything flat. So using things like a paper puppet and things that you can see kind of from a bird's eye view, like the shell looks pretty from above. I think that that's a lot easier and more manageable to animate. However, if you feel like you've got that down, you've got the the techniques of the animating down, you understand how to replace different facial expressions. Sorry, there's a cleaning truck outside. I don't know if you guys can hear it. If you feel like you're kind of ready for the next step, then you can go ahead and experiment with some 3D animation. For that, I have a few recommendations. I think using clay is really fun and pretty easy to work with. If you are going to use clay, I recommend you using something like plasticine, which is oil-based so that it doesn't dry. And so you can just continue animating with it all day and it won't dry. And then we've also talked a little bit about animating with toys, right? And so like today, you know, we learned how to break a puppet apart so we know which parts of its body are able to move. I recommend you thinking the same things through when you're using a toy, right? If you're going to use a stuffed animal to animate with, what parts of its body are actually able to move? And so if you are going to use toys, I recommend using something like Legos, you know, something that you can animate moving or taking apart or putting together. That would be pretty simple. So those are my recommendations for making a 3D type thing. Okay, so I know we have to end early today and I want to make sure that there's enough time for everybody's questions. So I'm going to kind of open the floor, and if you have any questions, go ahead and drop it in the Q&A box or in the chat box. I've also prepared some frequently asked questions that I will go over. And I know I went a little fast today, so please, if you need me to clarify anything, you can go ahead and put it in that question and answer box. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start on this, on my little frequently asked questions, questions that I came up with to maybe trigger your questions. So something that we didn't talk about in depth was materials that you can use for set building. And so, you know, we talked a little bit about using like a big piece of paper and kind of drawing or painting on it. Very much recommend that. That's super fun. But another thing I really like to do is using collage for set making. And so whether you are cutting things out of a magazine or cutting things out of just different colored construction paper or any other kind of paper you have in your house, I think it can make a really effective set to have this kind of layered look. So I really recommend you using collage for set making. Another thing that I would love for you to think about is that sets are kind of, in my opinion, it's your opportunity to get a little funky, a little creative, because the set's not going to move, right? You don't have to really think through it as much as you have to think through a puppet, right? You have to think of which body part is going to be able to move, how can you manage it all? But for a set, it's really just going to sit there. If anything, maybe the wind would move like the trees, but because it's so stagnant, you can put anything on there. So I recommend you look around your house, look outside. You could glue leaves to your set. You could use string. You could use buttons. You can really do anything and just glue it all down. And then you'll have a really dynamic and attractive set. So no matter what is happening with the animation, if it's maybe not your best animation, it's okay because it's going to look great because you're using your set. So that would be my recommendations for materials to use for your set. And again, just think about your animation setup. Another thing, I don't know if we discussed it in this class, but if you are looking for a larger set, if you get carried away when you're making things and you accidentally make a huge set and you don't know how to animate it, you can use a table and put it on the floor. And so I want us to think through a little bit how this would go. And I don't know exactly how to make this angle, but here's my desk. I would maybe tape these rulers like this, right? I would use the tape and tape them down. And then just like you do with the book, I would put my phone on this side. And then you can animate on the floor. Or you could even just put something really heavy on the rulers. If the tape isn't strong enough, you could just put whatever your stack of books is, right? And put it on the ruler. And then you're able to animate it. So, you know, of course, I want you to keep your animation station set up in mind when you're doing this making, but if you make something that's a little bit beyond the scope of your animation station, it's okay, because there are definitely solutions for it. My next frequently asked question, wait, let me make sure we're good on time. Okay, good, we still have a few minutes. My next frequently asked question is, if you are using 3D sets, right? We talked a little bit about using clay. We talked about using Legos or toys. So if that's what you're doing, I want to talk a little bit through how to create a set for a 3D or an upshoot animation. So the thing I typically do with students is I use cardboard. I use 2 pieces of cardboard, and I, have one as the backdrop, one as the foreground, and I tape them together. So just make an L with cardboard, tape it together really well. And then, on the ground, you can make mountains, you can make trees, you can make a river, you can make a bed, whatever you want. And then in the background, just make sure you either paint it or you cover it with a tapestry or something. So it's a really easy way to make a set. It's also really fun to look at kind of behind the scenes YouTube videos of Wallace and Gromit and see how they make their sets. And they're amazing, right? They make these huge cities and these warehouses that they animate within. So it's so fun to watch them. But you can also get some really good ideas. The way they do it, they really pay attention to detail and make sure that every part of the set is to scale with the characters, depending on where you're filming from. But even if you're not giving it that much detail, I think it is really fun to watch them, and I hope that it would inspire some ideas. And then the other thing that you can do is kind of the more simple thing, and that would be if you have your stack of books like right here, and you have a cloth or even a piece of paper, you can just go like this. And then, your camera would be set up like this, right? And then you can just animate right here and it would have a nice purple backdrop. So that's like the easiest solution. That's maybe what I would start with. Again, it would kind of look like what I animated today with our purple ocean, which is very simple, but easy to do. Great. It's a lot of materials today. I'm kind of struggling to keep everything neat looking. So we talked about that, materials. So the last thing I do want to touch on is props. So of course it depends on what excites your family or what excites your kids. But for me, I find that I like to make my puppets, right? I like to make the fish, so I have a lot of control over their movements. And then I can use things like toys or rocks or gems. I can use those as more of the props. So those are more of the things that are carrying the story along. For example, I used my cool purple gem, right? It doesn't need to move any way but across the screen for the fish to eat it. But other than that, it doesn't need to move. It doesn't have to have moving parts. So similar to the set, you don't have to think through it as much. And it's an opportunity to say, oh, I know you wanted to animate with your stuffed animal or with your toy or with this really pretty rock that you found. But instead of making that the main character in our movie, let's make it a prop. Let's make it our main character's toy or stuffed animal. And so when you are looking at your graphic organizer, when you're going through your film scene by scene, I recommend using that props column to kind of think of stagnant, cool looking objects you have in your house that you want to use as props. Right, similarly to all of the shells that I used. This nice piece of coral. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left before we need to end. So if you all have any questions, thoughts, if you want me to review something, because I know I went pretty fast, go ahead and put it in the chat box or in the Q&A box. I'm just going to review everything we went over and make sure I didn't miss anything, which I probably did. Another thing to think about, and depends on what your vision is for your film, is the dialogue, right? And we talked a little bit last class about how easy it is to make a silent film and you don't necessarily need dialogue. But if dialogue is something that you're passionate about or excited about, I would like you to use everything we learned today to think through how you would make a character's mouth move, right, as they're talking. And so professional animators, there are so many intense oh, okay, there's a question that I'm going to answer and then I'll talk about, or I'll finish this and then talk about it. Sorry. Whew, it's a little early in the morning for me. So if you're going to move your mouth, I want you to think about how we move the expressions and kind of do the same thing. So you would have one mouth open and then a mouth closed, right? And you would take a picture of the mouth open, maybe take a couple pictures of the mouth open, and then a couple pictures of the mouth closed. And this is literally what it would look like, right? So it might not be perfectly detailed of all of the different ways your mouth moves when you talk, but it will definitely get across the point that your character is talking. Okay, so now I'm going to read this question. So this is saying kind of in the movie that I showed, this person noticed that the background was a little bit blurry, the foreground was really in focus, and some of the trees and the plants moved. So there's a few different ways, a few different techniques that the filmmaker used. First of all, you are exactly right. The trees and the bushes were all separate pieces, kind of like my shells, and they were able to move in the wind. But the other thing that this filmmaker did is something that we're not going to have enough time to learn about, but you can think through it. It's a technique called multi-plane. So if you just think about what that means, it's multiple planes. And so I'll use my books as a little example. And so this, I don't know, using books will actually help. So they use a few pieces of plexiglass. So that's a clear kind of plastic, and they layer them up. And so I think in this one, she probably used 3 different multi-planes. So she has one up here, and then there's a little bit of room, and then she has another plate of glass here, and then there's the bottom. And so on the bottom, that's what's most out of focus. So that was probably her sky background. And then up above it, she put, a little house right here and right here, and then maybe a few of those trees that don't necessarily move. And then up here, she had the trees that move and the characters. And so it looks, when you look down, there's a lot more depth to it. And so you can kind of mimic this if you have any glass at home. In my own animations, I've used picture frames. I went to a thrift store and bought a bunch of different picture frames and then used the glass that I found in the picture frames to create my own multi-plane. And you really just have to find something that you can put in between the planes of glass. So I've used Legos before, I've used books, I've used cups, and you just separate the glass so you have enough room to stick your hand into it. Another scene where they used multi-planes really well was the water scene. I think she cried and then it created like waves. And so again, she had, you know, on each plane, there was an amount of waves. And then as she animated, she moved each of them along all of the planes. So it created a lot of depth. So that is a very, you know, advanced way to create depth. And if you, and you can totally do it, I would recommend looking up, so Disney is actually the ones that have coined creating multiplanes. But if you look up kind of how they made the movie Bambi, that was the first time they really used it. It's so cool and so interesting. And so I recommend kind of looking on YouTube or even just reading some articles after a quick Google to see some examples of multiplane uses and then simplifying it for your own use. You know, maybe you just have one multiplane. Maybe you just have one thing up here. So you have the set down here and then you're animating your puppets on here. That could still look really cool. So yeah, I recommend looking into it. But that's definitely the trick for how to make these simple flat animations have a lot of depth. All right, my friends, I think we are out of time. But if there's any other quick questions. All right, Hara, are we out of time because we had to end early?
It is better that we finish now if we don't have something else.
Yeah, I don't have anything else. Thank you, everybody. Our next class, we're going to learn how to edit our films. We're going to learn how to add music and sound effects. So if you want to finish your film, I really recommend coming to the next class. And that's everything from me, Hara.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.